Didn't mean to click that, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in to another thrilling episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. What a night in sports that it's been. We had Emmy's Dallas Mavericks close out those Los Angeles Clippers in 6 games with a monster performance from one of my favorite all-time players to watch in Kyrie Irving, who's been excellent so far in the playoffs. And we had Caitlin Clark made her unofficial professional debut with the Indiana Fever. She put on a show in the first half against the Dallas Wings, scoring 16 points, making her usual step back threes. She ended up scoring 21 points in her preseason debut. It's been a good night in sports. Texas baseball gets a big opening win against number 14 Oklahoma State, 7-5. Will Gasparino hit another home run that gave them an insurance run in the ninth. They're going to try to go for the series win tomorrow at 2:30 at the Dish. That's a big series, and it's great. It's a great feeling to grab the Friday game because then you put yourself in a position where you only have to win one of the next two to win the series. And a lot of this Texas baseball season has been losing Friday openers and coming back to win the Saturday and Sunday games, which they've done a good job of, but good job by the Texas baseball team tonight. Also, great job by the Texas softball team who keeps on rolling. They're now tied atop the Big 12 standings with the Oklahoma Sooners. I believe they're still number 1 or number 2 in the country, and they have the tiebreaker over Oklahoma. So if those two teams finish tied atop the standings, Texas won the series earlier this season, so they'll have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So all-around great night in sports. But before we get into anything else tonight, here at 11:50 p.m., Friday, May 3rd, please like and subscribe. Check out all of our content, including all of our episodes of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, especially if you're a Longhorn fan or a fan of college sports. And go check out our other content, including our Gut Check episode that we recorded last night. And joining me live from Austin, Texas, a happy man right now, fan of the Dallas Mavericks, but also a Texas Longhorn fanatic, as he joins me always here on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Greatly appreciate it, as it is 11:50 p.m., but it is a Friday night. Mr. Emmy Nixon, what's up?
I'm feeling good, man. Big series win over the Clippers. Finally beat the freaking Clippers, man. Oh my gosh. I feel like just from a mojo standpoint, if we lost this series, it would have broke me. But man, big series win. But I'm excited to get into tonight, man. We delayed the episode a little bit to watch the end of that game, but it was worth it. Now let's get into this thing.
Look, they didn't win the game that you went to, but I'm sure you trade the series win for a loss in that game, looking back on it now. So they move on to face the Oklahoma City Thunder. Luka, whatever he may be dealing with, gets 3 entire days off, 3 days of rest before that series starts up Tuesday night. Tomorrow's going to be exciting. We get the Kentucky Derby right around 6 o'clock tomorrow, I believe. And then we also get game 1 of the Minnesota-Denver series. The first game of round 2 of the NBA playoffs is tomorrow night. Emmy and I will be live recording another episode sometime in that early evening time frame. I'm hoping that it can be right after the Kentucky Derby, or maybe we'll plan it to where we start recording an hour or so before the Derby begins. It is the 2 minutes every year that I do watch horses race. Okay, with all that being said, let's get into this. Today we're going to be talking a lot about college basketball and what's been going on in the transfer portal with a lot of these blue blood, big name programs. So with that, let's cue the intro. Yes, we need some noise to that, but welcome to Portal Nuggets, everybody. Hopefully you guys enjoy the ride. I wanted to start by talking a little Longhorn basketball. Texas, their latest pickup in the transfer portal being Jordan Pope, a point guard, rising junior point guard from Oregon State. Averaged almost 18 points per game in his sophomore year last year, 3.5 assists per game, and shot 37% from three. Out of over 5,000 players that played NCAA basketball last year at any division, only 102 averaged more points per game than Jordan Pope. Great addition to this Texas Longhorns men's basketball team that now I believe has filled 11 of the 13 available scholarship spots on this basketball team with their transfer class, their freshman class, and their returning talent. But I wanted to focus this particular conversation on the latest pickup, Jordan Pope, and his addition to this team and how you think he'll fit in with what Texas is going to have on the court as currently constructed. So your opinions on this?
Well, he brings in some juice off the bounce for one. Like I think one thing we always talk about is the importance of guard play in the tournament, and him bringing in 17 points per game and possibly more than that. That's huge. And the fact that he's also a good shooter, he can play off the ball when you need him to, and he can knock down shots. He can be a threat out there. The more guys you have on this team that can be a threat from behind the arc, the better. I think last year we learned like the problems that come with having guys that just aren't threats from behind the arc. You just end up with a clogged lane, and the two guys that you have as your main guys, which was Dessou and obviously Asmus as your main scorers, they end up having a much tougher time creating space because they're just not nearly enough to go around out there. So I think with how the team is constructed now, I think he'll fit right in. And I think he'll be an option, late in the shot clock for when you just need a bucket, need to create something. That's something that's always needed on any basketball team at any level. So,
yeah, I've always liked Jordan Pope, even going back to his high school days. He played some AAU ball with one of his better friends in high school, currently now in the NBA, playing for the Houston Rockets. I don't know if you know this, but one of his better friends is Jalen Green. And that was one of his mentors through high school. And man, I've just always liked his game. He went to Oregon State for the first 2 years of his career, developed into a very nice lead guard, played on a subpar team last year, had a higher usage rate, but he was actually pretty efficient with the shots that he did take. I mentioned his ability to shoot from beyond the arc. He made over 2 threes per game last year. He's very adept at spacing the floor as the lead guard. He can score without the ball, which I do like. He doesn't have to have the ball in his hands to make things happen. But his strength is creating his shot off the bounce. He's very adept at getting into his shot off high pick and rolls into his mid-range game, finishing through contact at the rim, and knocking down shots off the dribble from three. And when Texas now, you look at this guard rotation with the addition of Jordan Pope, who is below average defensively, but at least like he's got a little more size to him than Max Asmus did. So at least, with this current guard rotation, you'll have Jordan Pope, who's 6'2", maybe 6'3", probably 6'3" on a good day, more so 6'2", but that's still a couple inches taller than Max Abmas.
Right.
And then you've got those 2 6'6" kind of interchangeable wings with Trey Johnson, the freshman, who I think is going to be possibly the best player on this team, and Tremont Mark, the other big-time transfer from Arkansas, who was their leading scorer last year. And that's just your 3-guard lineup. Both those guys are 6'6", so they can play the shooting guard or the 3. And then you have Jason Kent at the 4, who's a stretch 4 and can shoot the 3 a little bit. And then currently you would have Caden Shedrick, who would be kind of your rim protector, rebounder, do some dirty work on the interior. If we're talking about how Texas needs to utilize their last 2 scholarship spots, they're going after another big. They need to get another big, a guy who can give them more of a presence inside, give them some more rim protection, but also space the floor a little bit. I believe their top target right now is a up-and-coming sophomore, JT Toppin. He's distantly related to the other Toppin brothers. He was a freshman last year in the Mountain West at New Mexico, and he was very productive as a freshman. He's really athletic, and I think his addition could possibly pair very well and kind of be that missing piece that this Longhorn team is in need of. And if they can get that piece, you're looking at a roster with Kendall Weaver currently slotted to come off the bench, Julian Larry also currently slotted to come off the bench. You're looking at a 7-8 man rotation that could be top 15 in America next year. I think Rodney Terry's done a very good job of putting together this roster. And I think Trey Johnson is very much plays into like the X factor of how good this team could actually be, like how good he could be as a freshman, likely the only year on campus for him, could really take this team to another level. But just in terms of Jordan Pope, really like his addition. He's going to give you scoring. I think with the better players around him, I think you could see his scoring average go down a little bit. I don't know if he'll be scoring 18 points per game. It depends on how the shots are spread out. I think Tremont Mark is going to get his. Trey Johnson's going to get his. But you could see him average 15 and be an all SEC caliber point guard in his junior season. I think that's definitely in the cards. And if they can get that level of production from him, they can be a second weekend team in the tournament.
Yeah. And I generally like how it's built as well. Like you have your mainstay freshman 5-star, and then you have veterans around him to where you have experience, you have, high level scoring. And I think Rodney Terry is a good enough coach to where he can coach up a defense. I think he's proven that.
Yeah, I would agree. So let's go ahead and move on. I would like to talk a little bit about the defending champions, the Uconn Huskies, back-to-back defending champions. Now, we know what this team is going to lose, right? We know they're losing Cam Spencer. We know they're losing Donovan Clingan. We know they're losing Steph Castle. We know they might lose Alex Caravan, but he's actually a wild card. Like he's entered his name into the draft process, but he might end up coming back to school. He's the one guy. They're also losing Tristan Newton. So they lose a lot of what they had on that team last year. But I think what Dan Hurley has done so far this offseason is he's done a really good job of replenishing this roster. And it hasn't been in sheer numbers like a team like Kentucky that's basically had to rebuild their entire roster in a span of 3 to 4 weeks since the hire of Mark Pope to replace John Calipari, because UConn does have guys coming back. They do have Samson Johnson coming back, who played some important minutes for them behind Donovan Clingan. They do have Hassan Diarra coming back, who, was the backup point guard to Cam Spencer. They have a lot of young, talented freshmen that Hurley has recruited. But a lot of what they lost in experience, they're going to have to replace through the portal. And he's done a good job. He picked up Aiden Mahaney, who was St. Mary's point guard last year. Played 2 years at St. Mary's, was all West Coast Conference, all first team, all West Coast Conference first team, both years at St. Mary's, including as a freshman. And over 2 years at St. Mary's, he averaged 14 points per game. And one of the hallmarks of this Uconn team the past couple of years has been a really smart, veteran, experienced point guard that can score the basketball. And Aiden Mahaney gives you that. He also gives you a little bit of floor spacing. He can shoot the three, not at the highest level imaginable, but he can make shots from out there. And so you have to account for him out there. He shot close to 36% last year. And then we know they lost Donovan Clingan, which is probably their biggest loss. And they bring in a guy like Terrace Reed Jr., who played on a terrible Michigan team last year under the direction of Jawan Howard, who got fired. They bring in Dusty May, right? But Terrace Reed, he will at least give them a presence down low. He's not going to be Donovan Clingan, but he's really nice defensively. He averaged 1.5 blocks per game last year. He's got the size, and he's got some pretty exciting offensive ability. I think he still has another leap that he can take offensively in this Uconn system. And I think he'll benefit from playing with a point guard like Aiden Mahaney. He averaged 9 points per game and seven rebounds last year. And I think he'll be a nice pairing with Samson Johnson. And the reason that's important is because when you look at the past 2 years where UConn has won the national championship, they've had a dynamic big duo. You think about 2 years ago with Adama Sanogo and Donovan Clingan, and then this past year with Donovan Clingan and Samson Johnson. So again, it's not in sheer numbers. They still probably going to go out and get 1 or 2 more guys, but UConn is setting themselves up really well once again to be a top 10 caliber team at the start of next season. Do you have any thoughts?
Right. I mean, if I was a transfer right now, I mean, and UConn was interested in you, like, why would you not go to UConn? I mean, with what they've built there and the system that, offensive system that they have with ball movement, man movement, I mean, I think that's the type of place you want to go in order to boost your draft stock. I think you can, if you go there and you play well, like, not only show that you can, thrive in a, structured, system with ball movement and man movement and be like a connective piece. And scouts really like that. Scouts really value a player that can be a part of a unit rather than, just, a high usage guy on a bad team.
I think your point about the connectivity is really important, especially when it comes to Dan Hurley. I think if you ask Dan Hurley what's important to you, he wants guys that, I know it sounds cliche, but that will fit their system, fit their culture that they built there of no one's bigger than anyone else. We all play together, and that goes back to your idea of connectivity on both ends of the floor. Right. You're going to run my system. It's going to work. You're going to become a better player. You're going to develop in my system, and we're all going to work as a collective towards possibly a three-peat. And the thing I like about it is Like, we saw Jordan Hawkins be developed into an NBA player by spending multiple years at Uconn. We saw Donovan Clingan sit behind Adama Sanogo and then become that guy. We saw Tristan Newton, sit behind Jordan Hawkins and goodness, I'm blanking on Andre Jackson. We've seen this before. And it always seems like UConn has guys, and they have something that not many other programs in this environment in college basketball have, which is guys staying in the program and developing for just more than 1 year. It's not a NBA 1 year and out factory like a Kentucky has been, like some other programs have been. And that's something that I think separates them from a lot of the other blue bloods right now. Is he just has something special with that culture that they built there. So I think you get a guy like Aiden Mahaney who still has 2 years of eligibility left and could potentially stay another year after this, and Terrace Reed Jr., who has a couple more years of eligibility left and more room to grow. That's really valuable stuff. You don't see that a lot right now in college basketball. And UConn is not a football school. All their resources pretty much go to their basketball program, both men's and women. So they can lock down those guys with NIL money if they have to. They have those resources. So anything else on UConn, or can we move on here?
No, I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about Kansas. We have to talk about Kansas today. What was their issue last year? Like, what do you think their issues were last year? Before we talk about, let's kind of go back 1 or 2 months to this past season and think about this Kansas team and why they ultimately fell well short of what they were expected to do preseason. Because when you looked at their roster in the preseason, we all thought, yeah, this is going to be a really good team. And the first couple of months, we still thought that. But then we saw the issues kind of come to the forefront. And so what were their issues last year before we get to how these guys, I think, solved those issues?
Well, one is depth. We saw the injuries pile up.
Check.
2, half-court scoring.
Yep.
I think half-court offense. They really were primarily a transition team. They wanted to, get a rebound and push it right away, which I think works in to a certain extent. But I think once you get later in the season, you get these more important games in terms of teams trying to find their footing in terms of tournament seeding and all that kind of stuff. Teams really start locking down on that, and I think that's really what happened, along with obviously the injuries.
Yes, you hit on everything there. Lack of depth. The team wasn't as deep as we thought they were going to be. Lack of half-court scoring, but I would pinpoint more specifically a lack of floor spacing and shooting.
Yeah.
And then the injuries. Those would be my 3. They went out last year. They get a guy like Nick Timberlake, who comes from the mid-majors, and is one of the better three-point shooters at the mid-major level. And he just wasn't the three-point shot maker and floor spacer that they needed him to be. Elmarco Jackson, who's more of a young guy, and I believe will be back on this year's team, played a role off the bench as kind of that backup guard behind Kevin McCullough and DeJuan Harris. He didn't really shoot the ball well at all last year. They didn't have the shooting and the necessary floor spacing, especially when McCullough was dealing with his injuries, to sustain really good half-court offense to compete with the other elite teams in college basketball. And then the injuries really killed them. Like Hunter Dickinson wasn't healthy, I don't fully believe, at the end of the season. And of course, Kevin McCullough missed a good majority of the last month and a half. So, look, you lose Kevin McCullough, you lose Johnny Furphy, who's a one and done guy. He's going to the draft. He might pull his name back out, but I highly doubt it.
Right.
I think that guy's going to get drafted potentially in the first round because it's not the strongest of drafts, as we know this year. I think they've done an excellent job in the transfer portal. And before we even get to that, like KJ Adams is coming back. DeJuan Harris, their point guard, is coming back. And Hunter Dickinson is coming back. So it's not like they're just building a team from scratch in the portal. They have a combination of young guys. They have to go with highly experienced, really good transfer portal ads to go with returning talent. And I think right now this team on paper is my preseason number one, currently sitting here at May 3rd, right? I mean, AJ Storr comes in from Wisconsin. We know how good he was last year. Zeke Mayo is a high-level guard from South Dakota State. And Rylan Griffin, who was a wing at Alabama last year, who made the Final Four, he's got tournament experience. He's got what they lacked last year, which is the ability to knock down threes. We know how good that Alabama team was offensively, and Rylan Griffin played a big part in that. 39% from three last year. So I want to get your thoughts on their portal additions, the names I just mentioned, and how they fit with what they currently have returning.
Well, the 3-point shooting, I think that has to be the key thing here. I mean, you look at how the Big 12 lines up. You play a team like Houston with the perimeter defense that they have. How do you beat a team like Houston? You beat them with shot making. Like, you're going to have to make tough shots. I think that's the bottom line. You're not going to just beat them with, transition offense, fast break offense, because they're disciplined enough, they're fast enough, they're athletic enough to just get back on defense and stop that stuff. So I think they're in a position where at the very least they have guys who can make timely shots and be a threat. Guys who are gonna have gravity and are gonna get guarded. They're not just gonna be ignored when they're standing on the perimeter. So that's gonna make it way easier to play make. That's gonna make it easier on Dickinson in the post to do what he does. It's just gonna be a much smoother operation in terms of just execution.
Yes. When you look at this projected starting lineup right now for Kansas, you're going to have DeJuan Harris at the point. You're going to have likely Zeke Mayo, a 6'4" combo guard from South Dakota State, who was the Summit League Player of the Year last year and averaged 19 points per game, 6 rebounds. He's a really good rebounder for a guard. 3.5 assists. He can create, facilitate, and he shot close to 38% from three. You pair a 6'4" Zeke Mayo, who has the ability to create his own shot, along with DeJuan Harris, who's a fantastic facilitator and runner of this offense, with AJ Storr, who's got like skills as a lengthy wing. He's around 6'7", who's very good moving without the ball, who can give you some three-point shooting. He's not great as a three-point shooter, but he can make shots from out there, and he can create by attacking downhill. He averaged 16.8 points per game last year, was second team All Big Ten, and was a big reason why Wisconsin was able to make that run all the way to the Big Ten championship game in the Big Ten tournament. He was the star of that, started his career at St. John's, then transfers to Wisconsin, where he made a big step especially offensively. He's great in transition. That fits what Kansas wants to do offensively. He's really good. And then you have KJ Adams at the 4 with Hunter Dickinson at the 5, who has the ability to step out and knock down shots. And then you have Rylan Griffin, who was on a Final Four team last year as a versatile wing coming off the bench, shooting close to 40% from 3. You add a guy like Riley Kugel, another transfer that they got from Florida, who averaged almost double digits last year and can shoot the 3 a little bit, with El Marco Jackson, another year in the system. My goodness, that team is going to be loaded. And they're not the only loaded team that we'll eventually talk about here on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports over the next couple of weeks. When you just think high level about the teams that are going to be national championship good possibly next year in just the Big 12 alone, Kansas, Houston, Iowa State could be a top 5 team next year with their combination of guards and experience coming back. You think about Arizona being added into the mix with what they've done in the transfer portal. It's just going to be a dogfight in that conference. It's only going to get better. So I think that addresses Kansas side of things. They might add a couple more pieces. We will see. But with what they have right now, they're going to be top 3, top 5 preseason team minimum. It'll just be about staying healthy and getting the shooting that they did not have last year. Because they're going to have the depth that they lacked last year. They're going to have a much better bench, the ability to sustain maybe a Hunter Dickinson getting in foul trouble, or let's say KJ Adams goes down for 2 or 3 games and he's not able to play with like a sprained ankle. Well, you'll have Rylan Griffin who can play the 4. You can even switch AJ Storr to the 4 spot and, go small ball with KJ Adams or one of these other guys at the 5. Yeah. It's pretty exciting if you're a Kansas fan right now. Let's talk about Arkansas real fast. They're interesting because they have a new coach. His name is John Calipari. You may know of him.
No, I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's arguably the face of the sport because, we all know John Calipari. He's excellent recruiting. He's been putting the guys in the NBA for years now. He's known for his ability to put guys into the NBA, develop them, but hasn't had the success over the past half decade that Kentucky fans wanted. And so he takes the Arkansas job after Eric Musselman leaves for the USC job. And that lands Mark Pope at Kentucky, and we'll talk about Kentucky in a little bit. But Arkansas, man, they've of course they brought in a couple of the freshmen that Cal had recruited at Kentucky, and they flipped to Arkansas. But they've made a couple big additions in the portal. And we all know what was reported when Cal was hired, a big NIL package. They were giving him the resources that he needs to really go attack the portal and bring some experience onto this team. And what do they do? They go get Jonas Adu from Tennessee, who emerged as a very good big last year for Tennessee. Very important piece of that team next to Dalton Connect. Scored 11.5 points per game and 7.3 rebounds. Almost 2 blocks per game. He's a terrific rim defender. He can be their day 1 starter at the 5, can score a little bit around the rim and protect the rim. And he's got kind of an emerging offensive game, which is exciting. And they go get who I think was the best player in the portal, Jonell Davis from Florida Atlantic. He signs with Arkansas. Remember 2 years ago, he was the head of the snake on that team that goes to the Final Four. scored 18 points per game last year, 6.3 rebounds. He's a bigger guard. He's around 6'4", 6'5", even some people say. And he shot 41% from three. He's that high-level shot creator that you can build your team around. And I think he's going to be not only like first-team SEC good next year, I think he's going to be first-team All-American good next year. From what I've heard, he's going through the draft process, but he went ahead and he signed with Arkansas because I think he's going to come back to school because they offered him a massive NIL package. Scouts say he would probably be drafted anywhere from like in the 40s to undrafted getting a two-way. And it was reported that from multiple reliable sources that he's been offered a seven-figure NIL deal to come play at Arkansas. And so understand it. He was the co-AAC Player of the Year last year. He's that first-team All-American guy that can really take this Arkansas squad to another level. They still need a couple more pieces. Like their team is not yet complete. But Jonell Davis and Jonas Adu is a really, really nice start.
Yeah, I agreed, man. I think Adu, I definitely remember him on that Tennessee team as someone who just had like super just length defensively, just a part of that Tennessee defense, that hounding Tennessee defense. He was their paint guy, and I think he has really good hands for a big as well. Like if you hit him on the roll, he's not going to be fumbling the ball. I think they could even use him a little bit on the short roll. Like if you're sending two to the ball on Davis, if he's hot at some point, you can trust him in that short roll to make good reads as well with his experience. So I think their pieces right now, it's not just, the typical, Calipari, Kentucky, like freshman late in team. This is a little bit of a different formula than what he's typically gone with. And I think it's refreshing to see. I think it's something that is definitely needed. And it makes you kind of question what was really going on at Kentucky, because maybe he wanted to do this for a while.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting side conversation that could be had there.
Yeah.
I think part of the deal, though, was we're going to give you this NIL package, and you need to go out and you need to get the best that you can in the portal. You need to bring in some experience, guys that have been at winning programs. Tennessee's a winning program. FAU's been a winning program past couple years. Bring in some high-level dudes to go with the you can still have the freshmen and you can mix them in, but it can't be all young team like you had last year and the preceding 4 years at Kentucky. Because now, for me, the biggest question with Kentucky or with Arkansas is going to be like, can John Calipari get these pieces to fit together?
Yeah.
Because in my eyes, from a high level view, he's not the greatest. I wouldn't call him an X's and O's savant. Doesn't mean that he's not a good basketball coach, but I think he has other strengths that make him what he is. I think of maybe some other coaches that are more of the X's and O's savants, like a Bill Self, for example. Much more than I do Cal. I think Cal's the personality, the motivator. He's got a great ability to kind of galvanize his team and motivate them. And we'll see how good they are defensively. Like, I think, if anything, getting a 6'4" combo guard and Jonell Davis, who can give you size on the perimeter, and then Jonas Adu, who's a 6'11" shot blocking 5, can be the centerpiece of your defense, is definitely a change from what they've had the past couple of years. A Kentucky team that couldn't stop a nosebleed.
Yeah, and they were so young at the guard position that they couldn't stop the ball. Like the point of attack defense was just it was a darn it. What's the term for those like hotel doors with the circle that you walk around? The revolving door. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Indeed.
Wow, I sound dumb. It's 11:30, guys. It's late. It's midnight.
It's actually 12:30.
Yeah.
We will we'll talk about our last team for the night, the Kentucky Wildcats. And the reason I bring Kentucky up with Arkansas is obviously the Cal coaching carousel story. Kentucky brings in Mark Pope, who's a guy of their own. He played at Kentucky on one of their championship teams in the 90s. And he's come in and he's done a very good job of putting together a very nice roster that should be a top 25 team next year, I think. He's added a lot of experience and he's added a lot of very good players that can fill different roles, is how I would put it. I still think they need like a dude who can go get his own, go create his shot. Who are you going to throw the ball to when the shot clock is running down in March Madness? Who's going to go create their own shot off the dribble? But they have added a lot of different pieces here. They get a guy like Kobe Brea, who's been, I think, the best shooter in college basketball the past 2 years. Played at Dayton on a team that made it to the second round last year, has some tournament experience, but he was a two-time Atlantic 10 Conference Sixth Man of the Year. So he knows how to accept roles and come off the bench. He can fill pretty much any role for you, but he's special in his ability to shoot. He shot 49.8% from three last year on over 200 attempts. So he's dead eye from beyond the arc. That was third in America. And he also had a 71.5% effective field goal percentage, which is crazy good for a wing like he is, and a 72.5% true shooting percentage. Those marks were both second in the country. Very efficient, just dead-eye shooter. Like, that fills a role on any team. And you look at the teams that wanted him: Uconn, Duke, North Carolina, you name it. He was highly coveted when he entered the portal out of Dayton. You get a guy like Otega Owe, who I know very well because he played at Oklahoma past couple years. He's a solid wing, scored 11.5 points per game, 4 rebounds in only 24 minutes. He shot 37.7% from three last year, but his calling card is on defense, his ability to guard different positions. He gives you some versatility defensively, and that's important because what did BYU have last year under Mark Pope? They had, what are you laughing at? What are you smirking at?
I'll say something later. Never mind.
Okay. He had 3-point shooters and guys who could guard. And that's what Otega Owe gives you. You get a guy like Andrew Carr, who was one of the better bigs in the ACC last year at Wake Forest, averaged close to 14 points per game, 7 rebounds, over a block shot per game, shot 37% from three. He's kind of that ideal stretch four who can pick and pop from the perimeter, shoot the three, gives you more floor spacing. You get Amari Williams, a guy a lot of casuals don't know from the Drexel Dragons from the mid majors, and he's a standout defender. He's going to be your anchor down low defensively. 3 straight CAA conference defensive player of the year awards. So he is known for his defense, his rim protection, at an average 12 points per game, 8 rebounds. Like he can give you a double-double pretty consistently and be your defensive anchor. You get a guy like Brandon Garrison, who has a freshman last year at Oklahoma State, came in as a former McDonald's All-American. He was a guy that Texas targeted in the portal. He ends up going to Oklahoma or Kentucky. That trio of bigs, because you've got big physical presence with Garrison, who can finish around the rim. He's pretty athletic and rebound. You've got Amari Williams, who can also score a little bit and block shots. And you've got Andrew Carr, who's more of that stretch big, who's going to knock down shots from the outside. He's more of a skilled offensively. That's pretty scary, along with Otega Owe, along with Kobe Brea, who's a dead-eye shooter, along with Kerr Kriisa, who you remember from a couple years ago at Arizona. Then he goes to West Virginia on a bad West Virginia team last year. He's the guy who I kind of compare him to like a Patrick Beverly, except he's a better shooter. He's just a pest. He's going to make shots, talk his shit, play some defense. He's the guy that you want on your team.
Oh, yeah.
But as a pain in the ass to play against. So I think overall, like Kentucky, they filled out this roster with different pieces that fill a lot of different roles that you want to have on a basketball team. But they still need that one dude. Like, I think if they were to have gotten Jonell Davis, he would have been the perfect piece, the missing link here, because he's the guy who you give the ball to late in the shot clock who can go create his shot. They still need that guy. You could still potentially find that guy in the portal. I think they'll be looking for that. Certainly, they've already been very aggressive. But really, really nice job starting from scratch, basically when he was hired, to pull these pieces together. You've got a lot of good stuff here if you're Mark Pope.
Yeah, and I think the Patrick Beverly type has been something that they've just been missing the last few years. Just energy guys that are just gonna, coming to the game like midway through a first half and just inject your team with juice, just energy. We saw that for years with Brock Cunningham. We saw that this year with
Kendall Weaver.
Yeah, Kendall Weaver. He was the perfect example of that. Like just guys that are just gonna, talk their stuff and just, be a pest. Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, for a program like Kentucky that has had, I think, a weird culture lately. I think it's been like a whole lot of just, we're gonna, we have all of these young guys, they're all 5 stars, and we're gonna figure out by the time February comes. And then February comes and they sort of figure it out, but they don't actually figure it out, and then they get beat in the tournament by a veteran team. I think getting guys like that really addresses those things. Like they're not going to, play a Yale and get bullied on the glass again. Like that's just not going to happen.
Yeah. This Kentucky team, as it stands right now, is going to be 2 things that they have not been in the past half decade. And that is the very least, solid defensively because they got some really solid defenders already on this team. You've got the presence down low with Amari Williams and Brandon Garrison, and you've got guys like Kurt Kriisa and Otega Owe, the wing from Oklahoma, who can really guard out on the perimeter. And you're going to be experienced, which is a requirement, a requisite to make deep runs in the tournament. Like, if we know anything that is fact in college basketball for the last half decade, it is you have to be experienced to make a run, or you have to have some experience to make a deep run. And the nice thing about this, if you're Mark Pope, is I don't think the expectation in year one is to get to a Final Four. I think Kentucky fans were just tired of trying the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And yes, those teams were talented offensively, but they couldn't stop, a retirement community from dropping threes on their head. So, I mean, they couldn't stop anything.
Oh, man.
So it's a good thing, they got in. I think it was time for a change, and they just need one or two more pieces, and they can be a top 20 team next year. They can be a second weekend team. And I think if they get to a Sweet 16 next year, that'll be a success. And then the next year is when expectations will continue to ramp up. But at the very least, if you're a Kentucky fan, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He did it at BYU. He's a former player. He knows Kentucky like the back of his hand. He's already re-energized the fan base. He's not going to do the same thing over and over. He has a system. I think it's exciting. And the fact that, like, going into the SEC, just from a selfish Texas fan standpoint, I want, like, when Texas plays Kentucky, I want Kentucky to be good. I want Arkansas to be good so that rivalry is heated like it's supposed to be. I want, some of these other schools, Tennessee, to be good. Because I think that could be a really good rivalry from here going forward. And you have the Rick Barnes storyline, who's the real UT. Like, I want these teams to be good. I still want to play in a good basketball conference. I don't want it to be as good as the Big 12. I want to break from that shit. But I want a solid basketball conference that challenges you, will test you, and will prepare you for the NCAA tournament and keep your resume in a very good spot. And
that's ultimately what you want. You want a conference that's gonna bolster a resume.
Yes, and the
you don't
SEC,
want to have a gauntlet in non-conference just to sniff the tournament.
The SEC is going to do that because you think about some of the programs that we saw kind of rise to the forefront this year that maybe didn't have the postseason success, but still were good, and they're building something for the future. You think about South Carolina under Lamont Paris. You think about, just throw out a team out there. Florida, right? They're going to be good next year. They had some injuries last year. Like, I like it. I like where we're going here. Even Oklahoma's pulled in a pretty nice transfer portal haul. Now, their issue has been they can't beat Texas. And that's nice to beat their ass every year in basketball.
Oh,
yeah. It's the portal's really exciting. Like, I think Texas is going to add one or two more pieces. They're really looking for that another 5, another post player. I think as long as JT Toppin doesn't stick in the NBA draft process, I don't think he will. I think he's probably a two-way guy at this point, right? At least right now, even after a strong freshman season. If Texas gets JT Toppin, I think they'll be sniffing the top 15 preseason next year. Trying to think if there's anything else. Okay, I know it's 12:45, so if you want, we can just talk about the portal for 10 more minutes and then sign off and save everything else for next week. Do you just want to do that? Or do you want to?
Yeah, I think I'd be cool with that. Yeah.
Okay. So let's do that. We'll keep this college basketball. I guess another team I'd like to discuss as of right now is Michigan.
Hmm.
You look at what Michigan's done in the portal. They've got a top 10 portal haul as of right now, according to 24/7 Sports, which is what I use for basketball rankings and ratings, especially recruiting. But anyways, Dusty May comes in. He's hired from Florida Atlantic as the head coach to replace Juwan Howard. It's been a disastrous past 2.5 years at Michigan in their basketball program. You think about what happened 2 years ago with what Juwan Howard did in that handshake line, swinging at the other coach. We all know that Michigan fans love him. Former player, part of the Fab Five, et cetera, et cetera. He's now, I think he's already got another job as an assistant in the NBA, which I think will fit him. He'll be really good at that role. He just wasn't really, I think, ready for what being a head coach in college basketball at a major program like Michigan really requires of you in this age of 2024. Like, you've got to be adept in the NIL space. You've got to be able to not only recruit at the high school level, but like recruit your own roster every year to make sure you're not losing everybody and not having to restock your entire roster year over year.
Yeah.
You have to instill and build a culture, which I don't think he was able to quite do, a winning culture at that. And that's not a shot at Juwan Howard. Like, not everybody is built out to be a Dan Hurley, a culture builder like Kelvin Sampson.
Yeah, and I think it takes years to become that. Like those guys have been
I think,
coaching for probably. I'm not sure of Dan Hurley's background. I'm not super familiar with it, but like I know Sampson's been coaching like 20 years.
yeah,
More than
and
that.
some guys, are just better fit at the NBA level. And I think he'll spend probably a couple years under, on that Brooklyn Nets staff. He might come back to college. If he does, I don't think it'd be at Michigan. I think Dusty May is going to be there for the long haul. But he could come back and coach college, or he may end up with a NBA job someday. Who knows? But with what Michigan's done already in the portal, because they were horrible last year. I don't know if they made it to 10 wins. They were one of the worst teams in the Power Six, if not the worst. They just were not good. It was a disaster. And so they bring in Dusty May. You go get some centerpieces, right? You go get Vlad Golden, who follows Dusty May from FAU to Michigan. Thought about the NBA draft, but he's sticking in college. Good experienced player. Gives him a big presence down low, right? And then you go get a guy like Danny Wolf, who not a lot of people know, but he was on that that Yale team last year. And he's kind of the stretch 4, stretch 5, the ideal like I really wanted him on Texas's roster. He would fill like the missing link in their roster really well because he's big, he's solid defensively, but he can really step out and shoot it. He's got versatility. He can put it on the floor. Not a lot of guys his size are able to put it on the floor and score. He's going to be one of their better players next year. And then they've done some nice work going out and getting a guy like Roddy Gale Jr., who was one of the lead guards at Ohio State last year, scored in double figures. has already played in the league. Now, the rare thing about that is it's a transfer from
Ohio State to Michigan.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of those so far in this cycle. We saw Aiden Holloway go from Auburn to Alabama. It's just weird how the NIL world of college athletics works in 2024, but here we are. You go get a guy like Trey Donaldson, who was a guard at Auburn last year. He's got some nice pieces in the fold, and I think the goal for Michigan will be to make the tournament in year one under Dusty May. And if there's anything that we know about Dusty May, is he can do more with less. That's been his thing, because the lack of resources he had at Florida Atlantic, what he was able to do 2 years ago with that team, not a lot of coaches can do that. And
Yeah,
that's
or even
why,
last year too.
yeah, that's why he was hired at Michigan. So they're not going to be – look, they're probably – the goal, I think, for them will be in the top half of the Big Ten, make the tournament, and anything else that you get from there is a
bonus.
The whipped cream on top of the ice cream, the sprinkles on top of the donut. Yeah. You have any thoughts on Michigan from what you know?
Haven't kept track with their transfers that much, but I mean, with how big of a program they are, I mean, when they're rolling, they're as much of a blue blood as anybody. So I think they got. For me personally, I think Dusty May was probably the best hire out of all the possible candidates. Even Cal, yeah, and I know Cal wasn't available at that time they hired May, but even Cal, I think May, like as you said, can be there for the long haul. Like he's young. He can be there for 20, 30, who knows? Like this could be a Coach K type of run here, that possibly. And if you have a chance to get that type of coach, I mean, that could mean everything, man. Like that's huge.
Yeah. And they've got some culture guys already, like Vlad Golden. He was described as one of the better teammates in college basketball on that FAU team. He was kind of the glue guy. You think about Danny Wolf and smart, intelligent players coming from other winning programs. That's a really good start if you're Michigan, coming from what has been one of the rougher, if not roughest, 2-3 year stretches of basketball at Michigan. Now, luckily for Michigan, I won't say they haven't given a shit, because they give a lot of shits about their athletics programs and their especially basketball, because they expect their basketball teams to be good. But luckily, you've had a football team that's been pretty elite, and won a national championship for that matter. So I think they're gonna. I think they got a four-star like high level recruit too already to commit there for this upcoming year. I don't know what role he'll play, but that's good. They're mixing in freshmen with transfers, guys that have a couple years of eligibility left. I think he's done a pretty good job so far. So if you like, for those of you watching live, first of all, thank you, because it's almost 1 a.m. And we're going to wrap this thing up. Thank you to Emmy, who's hopped on after a long night, but a good night at that, as the Dallas Mavericks won. Glad he's in a good mood rather than not so great mood after that game. Now you get 3 days to just kind of chill and be happy and look forward to another, at least probably 6 or 7 games of Dallas Mavericks basketball. Tomorrow, we're going to have a very special episode I've been waiting to do for a long time. Emmy's been waiting to do for a long time, ever since like the start of the NFL offseason. You guys will see what that is. Might be in a jersey tomorrow when we do that episode. You will see. And we're going to do it for both of our respective teams, so you can probably get an idea what that's going to look like. It's basically going to be a Pittsburgh Steelers deep dive into the offseason and kind of a short look ahead to next year. So tomorrow morning, we'll tweet out the time. And it's going to be an entertaining show. Like, I've got some cool clips and short
Tomlinisms
that will be a part of that as well. So please tune in for that. And then next week, we'll have a pretty loaded podcast slate as we always do. We'll continue with some more NFL offseason coverage here and there. But the focus is shifting now to the NBA for the rest of the postseason, Major League Baseball as we get closer to Memorial Day. Golf, we have another major coming up here in 1 or 2 weeks. And then Dit Hole will continue going for however long. Because there's college sports with the portal and NIL and everything that's going on around college sports. Like, there's an off season, but there's not really an off season.
Yeah.
With everything going on. So please tune in. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great Saturday, and we'll be back tomorrow. Do you have any parting shots, Timmy?
Well, what I was laughing about earlier.
No.
My mind was just kind of wandering, and I was thinking of the commentator that was doing Champions League. He was like making all these weird metaphors when they were like scoring a goal. He said something like super strange. It's like more exciting than a box of frogs. It's something crazy like that. I was like, oh man, I don't know, but my brain just floats to random things at certain points. So
yeah, it happens to all of us. I love the Instagram shorts that, there's one with, it's a compilation of NFL commentators. Ian Eagle, Dan Fouts.
yeah, saying stuff. I'm guessing.
Yeah, they say weird stuff that's totally out of context. But like, there's one like Michael Crabtree when he used to play for the Raiders, made like a toe tap catch on the sideline, and
the way he just sucks in these balls.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Sucks in these balls, and it's just weird. There's one
down. He beats Cox.
Yes, you know the exact video I'm talking about. Those are hilarious. But there's also one. As people know, I'm a Yankees fan, and on the Yes broadcast, they've had some weird moments. Former player was on as like the color guy for a game, and you know how the pitchers like kind of rub the baseballs.
Yeah.
He said something like, "I've rubbed some serious balls down in my life," or something like that. I'll find that.
Didn't the announcer for the Yankees get hit by like a foul ball the other day too?
Well, that was actually last year, and
okay, never mind.
That's the radio voice of the Yankees, John Sterling, who's actually now retired. So shout out John Sterling. But yes, he did get hit with a foul ball that ended up in the press box that he didn't see coming. But yeah, I'll send you the video of the Yankees commentator saying that line, because there's like a long, after he says it, there's a long like 20-second pause with nobody talks, and then they just continue.
Like,
Yeah.
What did he say?
It was an awkward silence for sure after he said that shit.
What did he say?
It's like, I've got a long history of rubbing down these balls or something like that. Anyways, from college basketball transfer portal to sucking and rubbing balls. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Hook 'em horns, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Oh, God. OU still sucks.
There you go.